My name is Elara, and I'm 28 years old. When I close my eyes, I still feel the silk of that dress clinging to my skin, tight in all the wrong places, like it belonged to someone else. It was my sister's engagement party. The champagne flute sparkled like the night sky. Everyone smiled too hard, their voices pitched just slightly above sincerity. I kept mine low. I didn't have the energy to pretend anymore. The moment was perfect, almost. If you looked from the outside, you'd think our family was one of those golden ones. 2 daughters, glowing mother, proud father, laughter echoing through manicured halls. But inside me, something had begun to tear. I stood by the terrace door, sipping flat Prosecco, watching my mother embrace my sister. They were locked in a long, swaying hug, the kind you give after years apart, not after breakfast together. My sister's face was buried in Mum's shoulder, and for a second I wished I could just rewind time, go back to a year when I still believed I belonged here. Then it happened. I saw my mother's mouth move. Not much, just a whisper. But the words were unmistakable. I read lips better than I'd like to admit. She said, "You were never mine." My hand tightened around the glass. My throat went dry. I didn't know who she was talking about. Maybe I did, but I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe it. That night, I didn't ask her, I didn't even look at her again. I just went home, pulled the DNA kit from the drawer, the one I'd bought months ago and never used, and spat into the little tube like it might spit back the truth. That was the moment it started. Or maybe it had started years ago, and I was just finally willing to see it. I've always been the quieter one, the observant one. My sister, Layla, she radiated sunshine. Prom queen, valedictorian, charm in her smile and acid in her judgments. Mum adored her. Everyone did. I thought I was okay with that. I thought I was the kind of girl who didn't need applause. But now, I think I was just trained not to expect it. At dinner tables, I was the shadow to Layla's spotlight. When she got into Stanford, Mum cried. When I landed a full scholarship to a state university, she nodded absently and asked if I'd remembered to defrost the chicken. There were moments I wrote off. Holidays where they'd forget to get me a gift, or call me such a sweet helper instead of brilliant or beautiful. Little things. Invisible cuts. You don't bleed much from one, but over time, they start to scar. I thought I was imagining it, that it was all in my head. Until that night. Until the whisper, "You were never mine." I didn't sleep. I just lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. My apartment was quiet. Too quiet, and I started thinking about the photos that lined the hallway back home. Family portraits, vacations, birthdays. I was in all of them, smiling, present, but somehow detached. I always stood slightly off to the side. My hair was never brushed by Mum. My outfits never quite matched theirs. There's one photo I used to love. Christmas morning. I think I was 7. I was holding a book I'd begged for all year. I remember unwrapping it slowly, treasuring every second. My mother was in the background of that photo, arms around Layla, looking at her with the kind of pride I'd never tasted, like I was just borrowing the frame. I used to think she was just tired, busy, distracted, but now I wondered if she'd always known. The DNA results would take days, maybe a week. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Clarity, closure, or maybe deep down a cruel confirmation that I'd never really belonged, and that it wasn't my fault. Because if I wasn't hers, maybe the emptiness wasn't something I created. Maybe it was inherited from someone I'd never met. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend, Sarah. I went to work, answered emails, smiled at the right moments. But everything felt suspended, like I was walking through someone else's life. On the 5th day, the results arrived. And that's when everything changed. The email subject line was harmless. Your ancestry results are in. I sat in the break room at work, lukewarm coffee in one hand, phone in the other. My thumb hovered over the notification. It would have taken 1 second to open it, but I sat there for 10 more minutes, staring at my reflection in the black screen. Not a woman, not a daughter, not yet anything else. Just a question mark in lipstick. When I finally clicked it, I didn't scroll straight to the results. I read everything, every header, every cheerful sentence trying to make this seem like fun. Discover your roots. Explore your family. My roots were trembling. My family. That word felt like it belonged to someone else. Then I saw it. Right there in blue and grey, like it was just another data point. Parent-child match. No biological relationship to Janine Monroe. That's my mother's name. Or the woman I thought was my mother. No biological relationship. I felt nothing at first. Just a cold hush inside my ribcage. No tears, no gasp. It was too big to process, like trying to breathe underwater. I locked my phone, stood up, threw my coffee away. I don't even remember the walk back to my desk. My boss asked me something about a client file. I nodded, said I'd handle it. I couldn't hear her. All I heard was my own silence, vast, echoing. After work, I drove. No destination, just the road. Past the park I used to play in, past Layla's old dance studio, past the grocery store where Mum would leave me in the car with the windows cracked. I'd thought those were memories. Now they felt like borrowed clothes. Eventually, I stopped at the cemetery. I hadn't planned to go there. My grandmother's grave was nestled under a quiet maple tree, a place we used to visit once a year. I don't know why I needed to see her. Maybe because she was the only one who ever looked at me like I was enough. She'd brush my hair behind my ears and say, "You've got quiet eyes. Elara, like your real story hasn't been told yet." I used to think she meant I was thoughtful. Now I wasn't so sure. I sat beside her grave for over an hour, knees tucked to my chest, fingers tracing the grooves in the stone. I didn't cry. Not then. It was like the grief had no shape yet. It couldn't decide if it belonged to me. When I got home that night, I opened the test results again. There were more tabs, deeper sections, more data. I clicked through them slowly. Paternal matches. That's when my stomach twisted. One name, a strong match. Close family. First cousin. Maybe. His last name wasn't Monroe. It was Kepler. I didn't know anyone named Kepler, but the platform let me message him. I typed something, deleted it, typed again. Finally, I sent, "Hi, I think we might be related. I recently found out something unexpected, and your name came up in my DNA results. Would you be open to talking? It was 10:43 p.m. He replied at 10:59. "Hi, Elara. I've been waiting for this message." That's when the shaking started. My fingers, my breath, my certainty. I stared at his words. I've been waiting. What did that mean? Was this some mistake, a scam? Or had someone known about me all along? I didn't reply. I just sat in the dark of my apartment. The only sound, the hum of the refrigerator and my heart trying to escape my chest. The next day, I didn't go to work. I told them I was sick, and maybe I was. Just not in a way you can treat with medicine. I pulled out old photo albums, scanning every image like a crime scene, looking for clues. Mom's face. My dad's. Layla's. Mine. And that's when I saw it. A photo I'd never paid much attention to before. I was maybe 3, sitting in the grass, holding a red balloon. But it wasn't the balloon I noticed. It was the man kneeling beside me. He wasn't my father, and he wasn't in any other photo. The man had thick dark hair and a wide, lopsided grin, like someone caught mid-laugh. He wore a denim jacket with a patch on the shoulder, something faded but familiar. The way he was looking at me in that photo, it wasn't casual. It wasn't like the way family friends pose with children at parties. No. He was focused, tender, like I was the only thing in the frame. I flipped the photo over. In my mother's handwriting, Elara, 3rd birthday, with D, just D, no last name, no real explanation. I pulled out more photos, searched every birthday, every barbecue, every grainy memory. But he never appeared again. I didn't sleep. I waited until the sun started bleeding into the horizon, then opened the DNA app again. The man I messaged, the one named Kepler, had responded again. I figured this day would come. My uncle always wondered if he'd ever get to meet you. But your mother shut that door before you could even walk. I read the message 10 times. My throat went tight. So it was true. My mother had known. She'd known all along. I wrote back, "Who was your uncle?" A minute passed. 2. Then Darren Kepler. He was in a relationship with your mum in the mid-90s. She left without warning. She was already pregnant when she married your dad. I stared at the message until my eyes burned. Darren, D. So the man in the photo wasn't a family friend. He was my father. And I was a secret. I sat on the floor of my living room, wrapped in an old sweater, legs folded under me like a child. My head dropped into my hands, not out of shock, not even grief, but rage. A quiet, buried rage that finally found breath. For all the years I'd asked why I felt like an outsider, for every time Mum had said, "Don't be so sensitive," when I noticed the different tone she used with Layla, for every missed birthday dinner, every cold glance when I got sick, every moment she made me feel like I was simply there, not wanted, not chosen, just there. She'd known I wasn't her husband's child, and she'd punished me for it. My entire life. I picked up the phone, dialed her number. My thumb hovered over the call button, but I stopped. She didn't deserve confusion. She didn't deserve to control this moment. So I hung up before it rang. Instead, I called the man, Darren. His number wasn't listed, but I had one advantage, now his nephew. I messaged Kepler again, told him I wanted to speak to his uncle, just once. He sent me a phone number, and 3 hours later, I dialed it. A low, warm voice answered. "Hello?" I froze. Then, Darren. A pause. "Yes." "Who's this?" My throat closed, but I made myself speak. "My name is Elara." Another pause, the longest silence I've ever sat through. Then, softly, I knew it. I always knew it. I exhaled so hard it shook my ribs. My eyes welled. He said, "Your mother sent me a letter before you were born. She said it was over, that she was marrying someone else, and she asked me not to come after you, not to cause trouble." I swallowed, and you listened. He sighed. "I didn't want to ruin her life, or yours. I didn't even know if you'd ever learn the truth. I tried to move on, but I always wondered. Every birthday, every Christmas, I thought of you. I didn't know what to say. I didn't feel love. Not yet. But I didn't feel alone anymore. Either. We talked for over an hour. He told me about his job. He runs a garage in Oregon, said he used to race cars when he was younger. He asked what I liked to do, if I had a dog, if I still lived in California. He laughed once, nervous and sad, like a man touching a memory he never got to make. I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. But when I hung up, I felt different. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't a mistake. I was just someone whose truth had been locked away. And now, I had the key. The next morning, I stood outside my parents' house, if I could still call it that. The yard looked the same, too perfect. Grass trimmed to an unnatural height. Flowers arranged like a catalogue spread. But I felt like an intruder. Like I'd broken into a version of my life that had never truly been mine. I didn't tell them I was coming. I didn't give myself time to back out. When the door opened, my mother's eyes widened. "Elara," she said, like she'd just seen a ghost. I studied her. She was wearing one of her cream cardigans, the kind she always wore when she wanted to look soft. Her hair was pinned back like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Her mouth pressed into a polite smile, but her fingers trembled on the doorframe. "Hi," I said quietly. She stepped aside. "Come in." I walked into the house, past the scent of lemon cleaner and lavender, past the photos on the wall portraits of Layla grinning on graduation day. Layla in a cap and gown. Layla holding a sparkler on New Year's Eve. I was in the background in most of them, or missing entirely. We sat in the living room. She clasped her hands in her lap, legs crossed neatly, back straight, waiting. I didn't dance around it. I took a DNA test. Her expression didn't change. "I'm not your husband's child." Still. She said nothing. I leaned forward slightly. "And I'm not yours, either." "Am I?" That's when her eyes shifted. Just barely. Like a shadow moved behind them. She took a slow breath and said, "What do you want me to say?" The way she said it. Quiet, tired, not surprised, was almost worse than denial. "I want the truth," I said. Her gaze drifted to the window, where the curtains caught the wind. She was silent for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. "Then, you were supposed to be adopted. But when you came to us, you were already 3 days old. I held you and..." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "I thought I could love you like my own." I swallowed hard. "But you didn't." She turned back to me. "I tried. Elara, I really did." My chest tightened. "Then, why did you whisper, 'You were never mine,' to Layla?" Her face fell. Not shocked, ashamed. "I didn't know you were there," she said, barely above a whisper. I stared at her. "That's your defense." She looked down. "It was a mistake. I shouldn't have said it out loud." Out loud. Like it wasn't the thought that mattered, just the volume. "You let me grow up in a house where I was always second, always overlooked. You gave Layla everything, and you let me believe it was my fault I didn't fit." Tears filled my eyes, but I held them back. "You didn't tell me I was adopted. You didn't tell me the truth. You let me think I was unlovable." My mother blinked, and for a second, I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just sat there, silent. "I found my real father." I added. She stiffened. "He's not perfect, but he wanted me. He still wants me." Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. I stood. "I'm not here to argue. I just wanted to look you in the eye and tell you that I know, and I won't pretend anymore." I turned to leave. As I reached the door, she said, "Wait." I paused. I was afraid. She said, "I thought if I told you, you'd leave." I looked back at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a mother. I saw a woman who'd built a life on a lie and called it love. "I was never yours to keep," I said, but I was still a child. "You didn't lose me because I wasn't yours. You lost me because you never chose me." And then I left. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't even flinch. I just drove with the windows down, letting the air peel everything off me. The weight, the silence, the years of walking on eggshells in a house that never really wanted me in it. It was strange how calm I felt. Not at peace, not yet, but clean. Like someone had finally turned off a constant, invisible noise I didn't realize I'd been living with. By the time I got home, the sun had fallen low and gold over the rooftops. I sat in the driveway for a while, staring at my own front door, trying to remind myself that I had a home now, a life that was mine, not borrowed. My phone buzzed, a message from Layla. "Can we talk?" I hadn't heard from her since the party. Not since that whisper. I stared at the screen. She didn't know I'd heard it, the thing our mother said while wrapping her arms around her like a prized porcelain doll. Maybe she didn't even notice how her fingers had gripped Layla's shoulder like possession. I opened the message but didn't respond. Instead, I opened the photo album again, the one from my childhood. I flipped through slowly, trying to find what had always been missing. And it was everywhere. The absence. Layla's birthdays were extravaganzas. Mine were snapshots, a cupcake, a paper plate. Her school plays had albums. Mine had a few blurry prints, if any. I used to think it was just favoritism. But now I realized they were documenting their child, and I had just been the background. The next morning, I met Darren. He drove down from Oregon. I waited for him at a cafe on the edge of town, one of those quiet spots with too many potted plants and melancholy piano music humming under everything. I spotted him before he saw me. Tall, worn denim jacket, a little grey in his beard. His eyes were the same as mine. When he sat down, there was a long pause between us. Then he smiled. "You look just like your grandmother." I blinked. "You knew her?" He nodded. "She visited me once, after your mum cut me off. She didn't say much, but she brought a picture of you. Said I had her eyes. Said I'd know when the time was right." My throat tightened. "She passed away 2 years ago," I whispered. He bowed his head. "I'm sorry. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about the way he and my mother met, about how fast it all happened, how he thought they were building something real. She got scared. He said she didn't come from a family that forgave easily. When she found out she was pregnant, she vanished. I never stopped wondering. He said, never stopped hoping, and I believed him." He pulled something from his coat pocket, a little envelope, yellowing at the edges. "I've kept this," he said, "for when the time came, inside was a picture of me, just a baby, bundled in a hospital blanket, eyes squinting against the flash, and next to it, a bracelet with my name spelled in tiny pink beads. Elara," he said softly. "I named you. Your mother changed it later." I stared at him, stunned. "What was it?" He smiled. "Ariel." The name caught in my throat. I hadn't thought of myself as anyone else. But hearing it, hearing what he'd wanted to call me, made something break loose inside me. Like there was another version of me, buried beneath all the years, still waiting to be named. We sat in silence for a while. I held the bracelet in my palm like it was proof that I'd existed long before the lie had taken hold. Before I left, he said, "I don't want to push, but I'd like to be in your life, however you'll have me." I nodded. I think I'd like that. For the first time in years, I walked away from a meeting with family and didn't feel smaller. I felt like I was stepping into something new, not as the shadow behind someone else's child, but as a person with her own name, her own story. And that story was just beginning. The days that followed blurred into each other. I kept going to work, answering emails, sitting through meetings, but all of it felt like background noise. Something had shifted permanently inside me. I used to feel like I was living for scraps. A glance, a text back, a seat at the table. But now, I wasn't interested in crumbs anymore. I wanted the full truth. And something deeper than that, I wanted to understand who had decided I didn't deserve it in the first place. Layla messaged again. "Please, Elle, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like you're shutting me out." It was strange, seeing her write that, because I couldn't remember a time when she hadn't been the one doing the shutting. Every time I needed her growing up, every time I wanted a sister, an ally, even just a witness, Layla had looked through me like I was made of fog, and now she wanted answers. Still, I wasn't ready to cut her off, not completely. There was still a sliver of curiosity and, maybe, somewhere under all the hurt, a question, had she known? So I replied, "I think it's better if we talk in person." We met at the lake, the one near the edge of town, where our family used to go for summer picnics. I chose that place on purpose. I wanted her to feel the weight of it. I wanted the ghosts to be there with us. She was already waiting when I arrived, arms crossed, wearing her workout leggings and that effortless ponytail she always made look like an ad. "Elara," she said, pulling me into a hug like nothing was wrong. I didn't hug her back. She stepped back, confused. "Okay, what's going on?" I sat down on the bench, looked out at the water. The ducks were moving slowly, ripples following them like whispers. "I know," I said, "about the DNA, about Mom, about who I really am." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" "You were standing right there," I said, "when she hugged you at the party." You didn't hear her. Layla's expression shifted. A twitch in her mouth. Something too fast to catch unless you were looking for it. She said, "You were never mine." I watched her closely. You didn't flinch. She looked down at her shoes. I thought she meant something else." "Did you?" I asked. She was quiet. I waited. Then, finally, she said, "I've known for a while." The words hit like a slap I didn't see coming. Not because I didn't expect them, but because hearing them out loud made it real. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated. "Since I was 16. I overheard Mom and Dad arguing one night. Dad said he wanted to tell you. Mom said it would destroy everything. She told him to drop it. My heart sank, and you said nothing." "I was a kid," she snapped, defensive now. "I didn't know what to do. You knew our whole relationship was a lie." She shook her head. "It wasn't a lie. You're still my sister." "No," I said. "You called me your sister." "But you let me grow up thinking I was crazy for feeling different. You let Mum treat me like an afterthought." Her eyes welled up. I didn't know what to say. I thought if I told you, it would break you. I laughed, low and bitter. "No. Layla, you just didn't want to be uncomfortable." She looked stunned. I stood. "I'm not angry you didn't know at first. I'm angry you found out and let me walk around like I was the family's mistake. She was crying now. I'm sorry. I paused. Are you sorry for what happened, or are you sorry I finally found out she didn't answer? I nodded. That's what I thought. I started to walk away. Elara, wait, I turned back. You've always had the truth. Layla, you just never thought I'd be strong enough to hold it. Then I left her there on the bench, in the same perfect outfit, in the same perfect world I no longer belonged to. And for once, I didn't want back in. After that day at the lake, I didn't hear from Layla again, not for weeks. And to be honest, I didn't miss her. The silence wasn't cruel. It was clean, like the dust had finally settled and I could see the floor underneath everything that had been rotting for years. I spent those weeks differently. I started waking up earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I found a quiet joy in routines I used to sleepwalk through. Morning light filtering through my kitchen window. Coffee that didn't get cold before I remembered to drink it. I started journaling again, writing things I hadn't let myself think too deeply about, like how I always thought love had to be earned, that I had to become small enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, just to be tolerated, like affection was a transaction, and I was always overpaying. But now, I was starting to believe that maybe love wasn't something I had to beg for. Darren and I started talking more, every few days at first, then daily. He didn't push, didn't demand to make up for the years we'd lost. He just showed up in every sense of the word. He sent me photos of his garage, snapshots of the town where he lived, even videos of the dog he'd rescued years ago. Her name was Birdie. She had mismatched eyes and a stubborn personality, and he swore she had trust issues, just like me. Sometimes we'd talk on the phone for hours, not about the past, just about life. I told him about the books I loved, the job I hated, how I used to sit in the back of classrooms, hoping no one would notice me. He told me about the road trips he used to take when he couldn't sleep, how he drove from state to state just trying to feel like the world still had room for him. We're a pair, huh? He'd said once. You looking for a home, me trying to find one. I smiled into the phone. Maybe we're just building one now. In the middle of all this, just when I thought I'd found a fragile kind of peace, an email came from a lawyer. Subject estate inquiry, Monroe Family Trust. At first, I thought it was spam. But then I saw the signature. It was real. And my name was listed in the email. Elara Monroe. They still thought I was one of them. The email was about my grandfather's estate. He'd passed months ago, and apparently the trust had been contested by someone in the family. The lawyer needed to clarify beneficiaries and wanted to confirm documentation related to birth and legal family status. That's when it hit me they didn't know I'd taken the test. They didn't know I had proof. But they were about to. I didn't want the money. I didn't care about the estate. But I did care about the truth. So I went digging. Birth certificates, adoption papers, financial records. I found a copy of a notarized document filed, quietly in another state confirming my placement into the Monroe family when I was 3 days old. There was no record of a formal adoption, just temporary guardianship, the kind that's supposed to lead to something permanent. But in my case, it never had. I was never legally adopted, not fully, not by both parents, which meant I wasn't even entitled to the name I'd carried my whole life. My hands trembled as I read the document. How had they hidden this? How had no one told me? And yet something about it felt like justice. They had never made me theirs, and now I had the paper trail to prove it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the dining table, documents spread around me like a courtroom. The final piece of the puzzle wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, it was clarity. They hadn't rejected me now. They'd never claimed me in the first place. And now, I wasn't going to let them define me anymore. I printed everything, every document, every legal form, every test result. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I needed a map of the truth. And then I made an appointment with the lawyer. The office was in a glass building downtown, sterile and slick, the kind of place where emotions didn't belong. The receptionist was polite, too polite, like someone who'd rehearsed their smile 1,000 times in front of a mirror. I was led to a conference room, leather chairs, cold table, bottled water aligned like soldiers. The lawyer, a grey-haired man named Whitaker, greeted me with a practiced handshake and sat across from me, flipping open a file. "Miss Monroe, thank you for coming. As you may know, the trust of the late Mr. Charles Monroe." I held up a folder. "Before you go any further, you should read this." I slid it across the table. He looked surprised, but took it. Read in silence. First, the DNA results, and then the guardianship documents. Then, the notarized statement I'd found tucked in the county archive, the one that said temporary custody and never followed up with anything else. By the time he looked up, his expression had shifted. "I see," he said quietly. "This changes things." I nodded. "I'm not here to fight for a piece of the estate, but I do want the record corrected. I don't want my name associated with their family trust. Not on paper. Not in memory." He adjusted his glasses. "Do you understand that this could cause some discomfort to your relatives?" I almost laughed. Discomfort. "They've been comfortable for 28 years, I said. "They can handle a moment of truth." He didn't argue. I left that office feeling lighter, not triumphant, but whole. Like I had finally drawn a border around myself and said, "This is where I end, and you no longer begin." Later that week, Layla called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "They know. Mum's freaking out. Dad won't talk. What did you do?" What did I do? I told the truth. And that's what terrified them most. They had lived so long inside a controlled narrative. A family of 4, picture perfect from the outside, rotting from the inside. My existence threatened the mythology they'd built. That weekend, I went to the cabin. It wasn't anything fancy, just a little Airbnb nestled in the pines 2 hours north. No cell reception, no distractions, just me and silence and the ache I hadn't let myself feel yet. Because beneath all the truth, all the clarity, all the resolve, there was still grief. Grief for the mother I never had, for the sister I never really knew, for the life I lived as a placeholder in someone else's story. I lit a fire in the hearth, made tea, wrapped myself in a blanket and opened my journal, and I wrote I was never theirs, but I was still me, still Elara, still worth loving, still real. Somewhere around midnight, I walked outside. The night was sharp with pine and frost. The stars overhead looked too bright, like someone had dusted the sky with salt. I looked up and whispered, "Thank you." I don't know who I was talking to. Maybe to my grandmother, maybe to the part of myself that refused to disappear. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need their guilt. I just needed this moment, this silence, this freedom. Because now, finally, I was no one's secret. I was no one's mistake. I was mine. When I returned from the cabin, the city felt louder, heavier. The streets buzzed with a kind of urgency that no longer belonged to me. I walked back into my apartment, like someone arriving after a long journey, not just of miles, but of years. There was a letter waiting in my mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. My name in tight cursive across the front. I stared at it for a long moment before I opened it. Inside one page, cream-coloured stationery. Neat, practised penmanship I knew better than I wanted to admit. It was from my mother. Elara, I imagine you think you've won something. The truth, or justice, or your identity, whatever that means to you. But I need you to understand something. I raised you. I fed you, clothed you, sat beside you when you had the flu. You may not have my blood, but you had my time, my care. I'm sorry if you felt unloved. But you were never unwanted. You were just not what I expected, and I didn't know how to love you the way you needed. I see now that I failed you. I hope someday you'll understand what it's like to carry a child that isn't yours and still try to be enough. Mum. No signature, just Mum. Like it still meant something. I sat on the couch and stared at that letter, read it again, then again, and each time I felt less. Not because her words were cruel. They weren't. In fact, they were almost careful. But that was the problem. She'd always been careful. With her words, with her love, with what she gave and what she withheld. There were parts of her letter that almost sounded like regret. Almost. But they didn't feel like accountability. They felt like a plea for absolution. And I wasn't her confessional. I didn't respond. Not with a call. Not with a message. Some stories don't need sequels. Some endings aren't meant to be softened. Instead, I folded the letter and placed it in a box. The same box that now held my baby bracelet, the one Darren had given me. The DNA results. A copy of my real birth certificate. The photo of him crouched beside me with the red balloon. A box of truths. A box I was building, not burying. I met with Darren again the following weekend. We went to a farmer's market just outside the city. He bought honey. I bought too many candles. We didn't talk about my mother, or Layla, or what came next. We just walked. He asked if I'd ever considered changing my name. I paused. I don't want to erase the life I had. I said, even if it wasn't real to them, it was real to me. He nodded slowly. Then maybe you just add to it. Choose something that's yours. I like that. I liked the idea that I didn't have to erase to reclaim. Later that night, I thought about all the times I'd written my name as a kid on notebooks, in library books, scratched into the bottom of toy bins. Not once did I think it didn't belong to me. And yet, now, I was ready to become more than what they'd named me. I sat down and opened a fresh journal. On the first page, I wrote Elara Kepler. It wasn't official, not yet, but it felt like a beginning. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to start again, because I wasn't lost anymore. I was found by the truth, by the man who waited, by the strength I didn't know I had, and by myself. The name stayed with me. Elara Kepler. I said it out loud in the mirror. Once, twice, trying it on like a dress I'd never dared wear. It fit, but not in a flashy way. It felt like something I'd always had tucked away in a drawer, waiting for me to remember it. The next week, I made it legal. It wasn't complicated. A few forms, a filing fee, a quiet appearance in a bland courtroom where a clerk stamped papers without even glancing at my face. Just like that, I was no longer a Monroe. The woman before me, the girl who waited at doors that never opened, who smiled through birthdays with store-bought cakes and second-hand love, she wasn't gone. She was just renamed. I walked out of the courthouse into grey light and drizzle, holding the new documents close to my chest like a secret I'd finally stolen back. That night, I told Darren. He didn't cry. He just said, "I'm proud of you." And that meant more than anything the Monroes had ever said to me. The days after that felt different, calmer, but not silent. There was movement beneath everything, a shift in the tectonics of my life, until Layla showed up. I hadn't seen her since the lake. I came home from work one evening and there she was, sitting on the steps to my building. Hoodie pulled over her head, hands jammed in her pockets, like the weight of the world had finally begun to press against her bones. For a moment, I considered walking past her, but I didn't. She stood when she saw me. "I'm not here to fight," she said quickly. I said nothing. I don't know what I thought would happen," she went on, voice shaking slightly. "That we'd just move on. That you'd forget. You always expected me to forget." I said, "Because that made it easier for you to pretend nothing was wrong." She flinched. "You said nothing for 12 years. Layla." She looked at the ground. "I didn't know how to carry it. Then you shouldn't have kept it." Silence fell between us. Cold, long. Finally, she looked up. "Mom's not doing well." I waited. She barely leaves her room. Dad's not speaking to her. Everything's unraveling. I nodded slowly. That's what happens when the truth shows up. It doesn't knock. It breaks the lock. "I didn't come here to guilt you," she said softly. "I came to say I was wrong. I knew and I stayed silent because I was afraid you'd disappear. And because deep down, I think I liked being the one she loved. The honesty was unexpected and cruel and brave." "I'm sorry," she said, "not because it's convenient, because I should have said this a long time ago." She didn't cry. Neither did I. "I don't hate you," I said after a pause, "but I don't trust you either." She nodded, accepting that, maybe for the first time in her life. Before she turned to leave, she hesitated. "Your new name. It suits you." And then she walked away. I stood there for a long time after, watching the space where she'd been. The apology didn't heal me, but it didn't have to. Healing wasn't a gift someone else could hand me. It was mine to build, brick by brick, word by word, truth by truth. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again. Elara Kepler. Not an orphan, not a replacement, not an afterthought. A woman forged by silence and shaped by survival. I touched the glass, not to fix my reflection, but to greet it. Because finally, I knew who I was looking at. And she was no longer waiting for anyone to choose her. She had already chosen herself. The air changed after that. Not in any dramatic way. There were no lightning bolts, no cinematic rainfall, just a quietness that started to feel earned. I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I stopped rereading the old texts from my mum, those clipped, obligatory birthday wishes. I even stopped scrolling through Layla's perfectly curated life online. I no longer needed to audit the past to understand it. I was done being haunted. But the world wasn't done with me. One afternoon, I got a call from a woman named Helen. She said she was my caseworker, or rather, had been. "Your file came across my desk," she said gently. "I don't normally reach out, but I remembered you. Your placement was unusual. I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone pressed to my ear like a lifeline. You were placed into the Monroe household on an emergency basis. The intention was temporary. Your birth mother... I froze. What about her, I asked. Helen paused. You were surrendered without identifying information. But a few months ago, the agency began digitizing old archives. We found something, a name, a birth record. It was never updated in the state system, so it slipped through the cracks. I didn't breathe. We think we found your mother. She said, your biological mother. I didn't know what to feel. There wasn't room for more. I thought I'd finished unwrapping the past. I thought I'd hit the final layer. But there was one more box inside the box. Helen gave me the name, Ruth Emerson, a florist, mid-60s, lives 3 towns over. She never came looking. I didn't know if I should hate her or feel nothing at all. But something inside me stirred. Not anger, not hope, just the need to know. So I drove. The shop was small, the kind of place you pass without noticing unless you're looking for it. Emerson blooms, ivy in the window, a faded bell on the door. I stepped inside, and the smell hit me. Lavender, cut, stems, damp, soil. Familiar and unfamiliar all at once. A woman stood behind the counter arranging peonies. Her hair was long and silver. She didn't look up at first. Be right with you, she said, without glancing. I stepped closer. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Are you Ruth? I asked. She looked up. Her eyes met mine, and froze. Not the kind of freeze that comes from confusion. The kind that comes from recognition. She dropped the scissors she was holding. Elara, she whispered. It was the first time I'd heard my name said like a prayer. I stared at her. You knew about me. She came around the counter slowly, like I was a deer that might run. I named you. I held you for 3 days. Then I let you go. I didn't speak. I couldn't. She swallowed. They told me it was best. That I couldn't give you what you needed. That a family had already been found. I clenched my fists. That family never kept me. They never adopted me. I was a guest in their house for almost 3 decades. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I didn't know. I believed her. I didn't know why. But I did. We stood there in the middle of the shop, surrounded by life colour and bloom and scent. And yet the room had never felt heavier. I'm not here for a reunion, I said quietly. She nodded. I didn't think you were... I just wanted to look you in the eye, to know what it felt like. Her lips trembled, and I thought about it. I feel like I'm done searching. Her shoulders collapsed in relief or grief, I couldn't tell which. I left without saying goodbye. There was nothing left to say, but as I got back in the car, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't see a child anymore. I didn't see someone discarded. I saw a woman who had walked through fire, every kind of fire, and still stood tall. And that was enough. The drive home was quiet. Not the kind of silence that echoes, but the kind that settles into you. Like snowfall, I kept replaying her face in my mind. Ruth, my biological mother, the woman who named me, who held me for 3 days, then signed a line that meant goodbye. She had my cheekbones, my eyes, maybe, but none of the sharpness I'd expected. No edges, just sadness wrapped in softness. I didn't regret going, but I didn't feel closure either. Closure is a myth we tell ourselves when the pain gets too heavy to carry. Real healing is messier. It's raw and open and slow. That night, I called Darren. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey, sweetheart." I hadn't cried all day, but the moment I heard his voice, my throat closed. "I found her," I said. He was quiet for a beat. "Then I figured you might..." I told him everything. About the flower shop. About her face, her name, her tears. He didn't interrupt, just listened, like a real father does. When I finished, he said, "You don't owe her anything. I know. But if you ever want to know more, I'll be here. No pressure. Just here." I swallowed hard. Thank you. He was the only one who didn't ask what I wanted to do next. Didn't push me toward forgiveness or confrontation or some neat Hollywood ending. He just let me breathe. And in that breath, something shifted. I began to feel free, not from the past entirely, but from the illusion that I needed it to love me back. I started doing things I'd put off for years. Little things. I painted my bedroom the shade of green I always liked, but was told wasn't flattering. I got a new bookshelf and filled it with poetry, the kind that doesn't rhyme. I stopped answering calls from people who only remembered me when they needed something, and I started writing, not in a diary this time, but with purpose. A memoir, maybe, or a collection of thoughts. I didn't care if it was ever published. I just needed the words out of me, where they couldn't rot in the dark anymore. I called it inheritance, because that's what this whole thing had been. Not of money, not of name, but of truth, and silence, and fire. One afternoon, I found an old voicemail from my grandmother. I'd saved it without realizing. Her voice was soft, crackling with age and static. "Elara, sweetheart, I don't know if you'll ever believe me, but you are so much more than they let you be. Don't wait for someone to crown you. You've always had the throne." I replayed it 5 times. She had known, maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to see me. I lit a candle beside her photo and whispered, "Thank you." Then I wrote her into the book. The only woman who made me feel chosen. As the weeks passed, the world didn't fall apart. No dramatic collapse. Just a quiet peeling away of everything false. I changed my last name on every legal document. I updated my records at work. Some people asked why. I told them, because it's mine now, because I chose it. I was no longer a Monroe, no longer a secret, or a footnote, or an accident someone tried to forget. I was Elara Kepler, and for the first time in my life, I was whole. Spring came quietly. The trees outside my apartment began to bloom, soft petals pressing against glass like whispers from a kinder world. And for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading birthdays, holidays, family dinners I'd fake my way through, because there were no more performances, no more stages to stand on, hoping someone in the front row would finally applaud. I was alone, but not lonely. Darren came to visit again. This time, he brought Birdie with him. She barked at every mailbox on my street like they'd personally offended her. He laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. We spent the weekend repainting my kitchen, pale yellow, the exact shade my mother once said only looked good in magazine homes. I picked it because it made the room feel like morning, like beginnings. We didn't talk much about the past that weekend, just memories in fragments. He told me about a road trip he took when he was 27, sleeping in his car, chasing jobs that didn't last. He told me how he used to keep a photograph of me, a copy of the one with the red balloon taped to the inside of his wallet until the corners curled like dried leaves. "I always hoped," he said, gently brushing dust from a frame we were hanging. "Even when I knew I had no right. You had more right than they did," I said. He looked over. His eyes glassed over, but he didn't cry. Darren didn't need to prove his pain. He just carried it. The way men like him do, like bricks in a backpack, never letting them touch the ground. We sat on the balcony that night. Birdie curled between our chairs. The stars were soft and blurred, like someone had thumb-smudged the sky. "Do you ever think about the life you might have had?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "Sometimes," he said, "but I think more about the life we still can have." I let that sit inside me for a long time. He left Sunday afternoon, hugged me before he got in the truck, said, "I'll come back soon. You're stuck with me now." I smiled. I wouldn't want it any other way. After he left, I went through more of my old boxes, not out of sadness, but curiosity. Who had I been before I knew the truth? At the bottom of one, I found an old school assignment, a crayon drawing, barely legible handwriting across the top, all about me. Stick figures, a house, a sun with a smiling face, and one crooked sentence. "My mum makes me peanut butter, but she doesn't hug me like Layla." I stared at that line. How did I know? Even then, I sat on the floor and held that paper like it might fall apart. I didn't cry. I just felt proud of her. That small version of me, the one who didn't have the words, but had enough sense to feel what was missing. She was the beginning, and I wouldn't let her be forgotten. I put the drawing in my inheritance box, and, beside it, I placed a new photo. One Darren had given me the day before, of us, standing in front of the kitchen wall we painted together, covered in flecks of yellow paint and laughter. Two people building something they were never given. A father and a daughter, chosen, real, unbroken. That night, I went for a walk. The sky was blushing pink at the edges. Couples passed me. A boy kicked a soccer ball too far into a bush. Somewhere, a wind chime clinked, and I realised something. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or announcements. It shows up like this, barefoot, uninvited, sitting quietly beside you until you realise it's been there all along, just waiting for you to notice. I walked slowly, each step less about the past and more about now. No more running, no more hiding, no more begging people to love me right. I had enough, and I was enough. 2 months later, I received an invitation. It arrived in a pale pink envelope, addressed in Layla's unmistakable script. A card inside, embossed with gold lettering. "Join us to celebrate the baby girl we can't wait to meet." Layla was pregnant. There was a tiny photo tucked inside the card and ultrasound, black and white and grainy, captioned in blue ink. "Baby Monroe, arriving in December." I stared at the image for a long time. Not out of envy, not resentment, just wonder. I wondered what kind of mother Layla would be, whether she'd instinctively reach for her child's hand or hesitate, whether she'd make room for all kinds of love, or only the kind that looked like her. And I wondered why she'd invited me. Was it peace she wanted, or permission I didn't respond? Not right away. Instead, I folded the card neatly, set it on my desk, and took the long way to the bookstore. I wandered the aisles until I found the section labelled Family. There, tucked between memoirs and manuals, I found a worn spine with a simple title, The Ones Who Stay. It wasn't about blood. It was about choice. About the people who love you not because they have to, but because they decide to. I bought it and mailed it to Layla. No note, just a bookmark pressed between the pages on chapter 4. Repair begins when the silence breaks, and not before. 2 days later, she replied. I read it. Thank you. If she ever asks about you one day, I'll tell her the truth, that her aunt chose herself, and in doing so, taught me how to choose her better. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. A crack in the wall. A little sunlight. That same weekend, I helped Darren organise a community fundraiser at his garage. We handed out free oil changes for single mothers, raised money for a local shelter, grilled hot dogs until the sun dropped below the trees. At the end of the night, a woman came up to me, mid-30s, tired eyes, 2 kids tugging at her sleeves. "You're Elara, right?" she asked. I nodded, surprised. She smiled. "Darren talks about you. Says you're his miracle." I laughed softly. "He's mine too." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small bouquet. "My daughter picked these from our backyard. Wanted you to have them. They were wildflowers, imperfect, vibrant, alive." I took them, heart full. Darren caught me a moment later, grinning like a fool. "Told you, you belong here." And I did. Not in a fairy tale, not in a fantasy. In this world, this life, this quiet, blooming aftermath. That night, I sat on my porch with Birdie curled at my feet. I looked at the stars again, as I had so many nights before, but this time, I didn't ask them for answers. I just said thank you. For every closed door, every lie exposed, every quiet moment that followed the storm. Because if none of it had happened, I never would have met myself. Not fully, not fiercely, not freely. And I like her. I like the woman who walks without waiting for permission. The woman who chose her own name. The woman who made a family out of truth, not tradition. Her name is Elara Kepler, and she's not afraid anymore. The morning of the baby's birth, I woke up to a text from Layla. Just a photo. No words. No emojis. Just the image of a tiny newborn, bundled in a pale green swaddle. Her face wrinkled and perfect, her mouth forming the smallest O, like she was already curious about the world she'd entered. Underneath, the name Mira Elara Monroe. I sat up in bed, the phone trembling in my hand. It took a full minute for the meaning to land. She had given her daughter my name. Not the name I was given. The name I had chosen. The name I had bled and rebuilt and grown into like a second skin. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure I could. I just stared at that name again and again until it blurred on the screen, and tears spilled quietly down my cheeks. Not out of pain, not even joy, just release. A small, gentle untying of something I didn't know was still holding on. Maybe Layla didn't mean it as a tribute. Maybe she did. Maybe it was her way of rewriting something broken, not to erase it, but to let it live differently. Better. That day, I walked through the city like I was floating. People passed me. Dogs barked, horns honked, but none of it reached me. I was somewhere else, somewhere higher. That night, Darren called. "You see the photo?" "Yeah," I said, voice soft. He chuckled. "It's a nice name." I smiled. "It is." "You okay?" "I think so," I said. Then, after a pause, "Yeah, I think I'm really okay." We didn't talk long. We didn't need to. Some days, just knowing someone's there is enough. After we hung up, I pulled out my inheritance box one last time. I spread everything across my floor like a mosaic of the life I'd survived. The DNA results, the guardianship documents, the photo with the red balloon, the baby bracelet from Darren, the letter from my mother, the drawing I made in 2nd grade, and a new photo of me taken last week. Smiling, alone, in a field of sunflowers I'd driven hours to find. Not staged, not curated, just me. I looked down at it all, the paper trail of a truth that once broke me, and then I began putting each piece away, one by one, not to forget, but because I didn't need to carry it anymore. I tucked the box beneath my bed and whispered to it, "You were my fire," and then I left it there. I went to my desk, pulled out a blank notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "The rest begins here," and that's what I chose. Not revenge, not retribution, not an endless echo of what I wasn't given, but the rest, the love I would build, the joy I would claim, the truth I would speak, even when it trembled out of me. I still see them sometimes. My mother, at the grocery store, pretending not to notice me. My father, shrinking into his collar. Layla, in the park with a stroller, exhaustion and wonder wrapped around her like fog. I nod politely. I smile if our eyes meet. I don't run. Because I no longer need their absence to define me. I'm not the family secret anymore. I'm the woman who made peace out of ash. The woman who rose, not like fire but like stone, solid, lasting, real. People ask me now if I want children, if I want a family of my own. And the truth is, I already have one. Not made of blood, made of choice, made of the people who showed up, the ones who stayed, the ones who didn't flinch when I shattered. Darren, Sarah, the woman at the garage who gave me flowers, the little girl who will one day ask about her name, and maybe, just maybe, hear my story told without bitterness. A story about a girl who was never chosen, and chose herself instead.